The smell of stale coffee and burnt bacon grease was the perfume of Zora James's life. It clung to her hair, her cheap polyester uniform, and the weary lines around her 26-year-old eyes. She worked at the Comet Diner in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a place that pretended to be grander than it was, with polished brass railings always smudged with fingerprints and red vinyl booths cracked like old leather. It was a purgatory for the city's aspiring artists, and in Zora's case, forgotten scholars. Each morning she tied her frayed apron and pasted on a smile that rarely reached her eyes. She was good at her job, efficient, polite, and, as a black woman in this particular neighborhood, almost invisible. The perfect waitress. No one complaining about the temperature of their soup would ever guess that Zora could dissect the semiotics of Renaissance art or debate French existentialist philosophy. No one knew that 4 years ago, she had been a top student at the Sorbonne in Paris, living a life painted in the vibrant colors of her dreams. Then came the phone call. Her father's heart attack, the collapse of his small construction business, the mountain of debt. Her dream dissolved overnight. She flew home, leaving behind the cobblestone streets of the Latin Quarter for the cracked pavement of a tiny Queens apartment she now shared with her friend Nia. Paris became a ghost, a painful whisper of a life that belonged to someone else. "Order up," barked Gus the cook, his voice a gravelly roar over the sizzle of the griddle. Zora grabbed the heavy plates, weaving through the cramped diner with a practiced grace. Table 7 was her nemesis today, a man in a pinstripe suit named Mr. Albright, who had already sent back his orange juice because it had too much pulp. He was trying desperately to impress his much younger date. "And make sure the steak is medium rare," he'd ordered earlier, snapping his fingers. "If it bleeds, I'm sending it back. If it's gray, I'm sending it back." "Got it, sweetheart." Zora had just smiled. "Perfectly clear, sir." As she navigated the lunchtime rush, her eyes briefly scanned the room. In the far corner booth, a man sat alone. He was different from the usual Comet crowd. He wasn't on his phone or trying to be seen. He was just watching. Dressed in a simple dark gray cashmere sweater, there was no flashy watch, no ostentatious display of wealth, but the cut of his clothes and the quiet intensity in his gaze spoke of a different world. He nursed a single black coffee, and every time she passed, she felt his observant eyes on her. It wasn't creepy, just analytical. She'd pegged him as a writer, or perhaps a professor. It was just another Tuesday. A relentless cycle of pouring coffee, taking orders, and absorbing the casual condescension of people who had never known what it felt like to choose between paying the electricity bill and buying groceries. She moved toward Albright's table, unaware that this mundane, soul-crushing Tuesday was about to cleave her life in two. The man in the corner took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze following her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. He wasn't just watching a waitress. He was waiting. The bell above the diner door chimed. An elderly woman, looking flustered and out of place, stepped inside. She clutched a large handbag, her eyes wide, scanning the chaotic room. Her clothes were elegant but simple, suggesting a tourist who had taken a wrong turn off Madison Avenue. She approached the host's stand where a teenager named Ricky was struggling with the seating chart. "A table, s'il-vous plaît?" she asked, her English heavily accented. Ricky stared at her blankly. "A what table?" "For one." "S'il vous plaît," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. Yeah, hold on," Ricky mumbled, not looking up. The woman waited, looking increasingly distressed. She tried again, this time in her native tongue, a rapid-fire stream of French, explaining she was lost, her phone was dead, and she was supposed to meet her tour group at the Met. Ricky just shook his head. "Sorry lady, I don't speak, whatever that is." "Spanish." From his table, Mr. Albright let out a loud, theatrical sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Let a man of culture handle this." He stood up, puffing out his chest. "Bonjour, madam," he said, his accent a grotesque caricature. I can help you. You, want a table?" The French woman just looked more confused. Zora, who was delivering a basket of bread nearby, felt a hot flush of second-hand embarrassment. It was painful to listen to. Albright was butchering the language, turning its beautiful lyricism into a clumsy assault on the ears. Voulez-vous, sit down, he continued, gesturing wildly. Zora couldn't stand it anymore. It was more than just his terrible French. It was his arrogance, his smug satisfaction in making a spectacle of this poor, lost woman. It was the same condescension he'd shown her all afternoon. Something inside her, the part of her that remembered strolling along the Seine, finally snapped. She placed the bread on the table, wiped her hands on her apron, and approached the elderly woman. The man in the corner booth, Julian Croft, leaned forward ever so slightly, his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. Zora looked at the woman and smiled gently. Then she spoke. The voice that came out was not the tired, flat voice of a New York waitress. It was a voice from another life, smooth and clear as a bell. Pardonnez-moi, madame, she began, her Parisian accent flawless and pure. Ne vous comprends pas. Puis-je vous aider? Vous semblez perdu, excuse me, madame. This man doesn't understand you. May I help you? You seem lost. The room seemed to fall silent. Albright's jaw went slack. Gus peeked out from the kitchen window. The French woman's face, however, lit up with profound relief. Oh, mon Dieu, oui, she exclaimed, launching into her story again, but this time the words found a safe harbor. Zora listened patiently. Ne vous inquiétez pas, madame. Tout ira bien, she said soothingly. Don't you worry, madame. Everything will be all right. She turned to Ricky. Ricky, can you seat this lady at table 12, please? Then she turned back to the woman. Please, have a seat. Let me use my phone to call your tour guide. While the woman, Madame Laurent, fumbled in her purse for the tour company's brochure, Zora turned to face Mr. Albright. His face was a mottled shade of red, a mixture of fury and humiliation. If you'll excuse me, sir, Zora said, her voice reverting to its polite, professional tone. I'll get you that bottled water now. She didn't wait for a reply. She retrieved her phone, made a quick call, and sorted out Madame Laurent's predicament. The tour bus was waiting. She gave the woman clear directions written on a napkin to a taxi stand. Madame Laurent was effusive in her gratitude, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into Zora's hand, which Zora gently refused. C'est mon plaisir, madame. Bon voyage. As Madame Laurent left, a sense of quiet satisfaction settled over Zora. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again. She went to clear Albright's table. He was gone, but he'd left a paltry dollar tip on a $100 bill. She wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was that the man in the corner booth was also getting up to leave. He caught her eye as he slid on a tailored navy blue coat. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a look of profound appraisal in his eyes. He left 5 crisp $100 bills on his table for a $3 coffee and walked out without a word. Zora pocketed the shockingly generous tip, feeling a small thrill of victory. She thought that was the end of it. She had no idea it was only the beginning. When her shift finally ended, she felt the familiar ache in her feet and the deeper ache in her soul. She was heading for the back exit when Gus called out. Hey, James, he was holding a sleek black envelope. The quiet guy. The one in the corner booth. He came back a few minutes ago, said he forgot to give this to you. Told me to make sure you got it personally. Zora frowned, taking the envelope. It was made of heavy, expensive card stock. There was no name, just an elegant silver seal holding it closed, the stylized wings of what looked like a falcon. Leaning against the brick wall under the dim glow of a security light, she broke the seal. Inside were 2 items. The first was a business card, thick and black. The silver falcon crest was embossed at the top. Below it, in minimalist silver lettering, were a name and a title, Julian Croft, CEO, Axiom Global. Zora's breath caught. Axiom Global wasn't just some tech company. It was a titan in aerospace, logistics, and cutting-edge AI. Julian Croft was a legend, a reclusive genius who had built an empire from scratch. That was the quiet man from the diner. The second item made her heart stop. It was a reservation confirmation for a private jet, scheduled to depart from Teterboro Airport the next day at noon. The destination, Le Bourget Airport, Paris. The passenger's name, Zora James. Tucked into the fold of the ticket was a small handwritten note. Miss James, talent should never be wasted on serving mediocrity. A voice like yours belongs in Paris, not in a diner arguing over bottled water. A car will be waiting for you at your address tomorrow at 10 a.m., your seat will be waiting. This is not a request. It's an opportunity. Her mind reeled. This had to be a joke. An elaborate, cruel prank. But the expense, a private jet. She stumbled home in a daze, the black envelope clutched in her hand. "Whoa, you look like you've seen a ghost," her roommate Nia said, looking up from the couch. Zora laid the contents of the envelope on the coffee table. Nia picked up the card. Axiom Global. Isn't that? Her eyes widened. She read the note, then looked at the ticket. Her mouth fell agape. Zora. What is this? I don't know, Zora whispered. He was there at the diner. The guy who left the $500 tip. Nia's shock quickly morphed into deep-seated suspicion. Okay, hold on. A strange billionaire leaves you a private jet ticket to Paris? Zora, this is how horror movies start. Human trafficking, a weird cult, you cannot be serious. I know, Zora said, running a hand through her hair. But the note. Talent should never be wasted. So he heard you speak French. Big deal, Nia countered, pacing the small living room. And how did he get your address? That's not just observant. That's investigative. It's stalker-level stuff. The question hung in the air, heavy and unnerving. But beneath the fear, something else was stirring. A wild, dangerous hope. Paris. The word alone was a physical ache in her chest. The ticket on the table was a doorway back to the life that had been stolen from her. What if it's real? Zora asked, her voice barely a whisper. What if it's just an opportunity, like he said? And what if it's a trap? Nia retorted. You throw away your job, your life here, on the whim of a man you met for 5 seconds? Be realistic. Zora looked around the cramped apartment, at the peeling paint and the stack of overdue bills. This was her reality. It was safe, predictable, and it was slowly suffocating her. The fear was real. But the pull of Paris, the intoxicating possibility of escape, was stronger. She looked at Nia, her oldest friend, her anchor. I think I have to go, Zora said, the words tasting strange on her tongue. I have to know. At precisely 10 a.m. the next day, a black Mercedes sedan materialized at her curb. A chauffeur in a crisp suit opened the rear door. Miss James. We are ready when you are. The ride to Teterboro was silent. They bypassed the main terminal, driving directly to a private hangar where a gleaming Gulfstream jet waited on the tarmac. The interior was a study in understated luxury, cream leather seats, polished mahogany, and subtle silver accents. She was the only passenger. As the jet climbed steeply into the clouds, New York City shrank below, her old life vanishing into a haze. 7 hours later, the lights of Paris emerged from the darkness. The Eiffel Tower pierced the sky like a diamond needle. She was back. After 4 years, she was finally back. She was escorted from the plane directly to another waiting car. It didn't stop at a hotel. It pulled up to a set of imposing wrought iron gates, which opened onto a private drive leading to a magnificent private mansion. The massive oak door swung open before she could touch it. Standing in the grand marble-floored foyer was Julian Croft. "Miss James," he said, his voice a calm, low baritone. "Welcome to Paris. I trust your flight was comfortable." Yes, thank you," she stammered, feeling small and out of place. "Mr. Croft, I don't understand any of this." "I know," he said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Clarity is the purpose of your visit. But first, you must be exhausted. My housekeeper will show you to your room. We can talk in the morning." The next morning, Zora found Julian Croft in a vast, book-lined study. He gestured for her to sit in a leather armchair. "You are here, Miss James," he began, giving her his full attention, "because I am in need of a very specific skill set. A skill set I believe you possess." Before he could elaborate, the study doors opened. A woman entered, impossibly chic and radiating an aura of intimidating authority. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, and her eyes swept over Zora with a cool, dismissive glance. "Julian, you're late for the Beaumont preliminary," she said, her voice crisp. She stopped and looked at Zora again. "Is this her?" "The waitress." "Zora James, this is my sister, Victoria Croft," Julian said, his face impassive. "She is the COO of Axiom Global." Victoria offered a smile as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. "A pleasure. Though I confess I don't understand the purpose of this experiment, Julian. He seems to think that because you can speak French, you can solve a multi-billion-dollar problem for us." "A multi-billion-dollar problem? What did they think she was?" Julian finally offered an explanation. "Axiom Global is in the final stages of acquiring a French company. Maison Beaumont." Zora knew the name. It was a legendary Parisian luxury house, famous for bespoke leather goods, a bastion of old-world craftsmanship. "Beaumont is family-owned," Julian continued. "And the current matriarch, Colette Beaumont, is resistant. She believes an American tech company like ours will destroy her family's legacy. We've sent teams of the best negotiators in the world, and they've all failed. They don't speak her language." "And I don't mean French," Victoria interjected. "They don't speak the language of culture, of nuance. Colette Beaumont slammed the door on our last M&A head because he wore white sneakers to a meeting." "You need a translator," Zora said, beginning to understand. "No," Julian said, leaning forward. "We have hundreds of translators. I need a bridge. Someone who understands the subtlety of French culture, who can show respect for their heritage, but who also understands the ambition of the American mindset." In the diner, I didn't just see a waitress speaking French. I saw a woman of intelligence handle an arrogant man with poise, then treat a frightened woman with genuine compassion. That combination, poise, cultural fluency, and empathy, is rarer than you can imagine. "It's a romantic notion, Julian," Victoria sighed. "This is a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, not a social experiment. Miss James has no corporate experience. She served pie yesterday." The insult landed like a blow, but Zora held her ground. "Here is the situation, Miss James," Julian said. "This is a job interview. I want you to be part of the team meeting with Colette Beaumont. I don't want you to negotiate finances. I want you to listen, to observe, to build a bridge where we have only found walls." "And if I succeed?" Zora asked. "If you help us secure this deal," Julian said, "I will create a position for you at this company, Director of Cultural Integration. You will have a new life, a salary that will solve any family debt, and a career that utilizes your actual talents. I will also fund the completion of your degree." It was an offer beyond comprehension. "And if I fail?" "If you fail," Victoria answered, "a car will take you back to the airport, and you will be on the next flight back to New York. You can have your old job back at the diner." This was insane. They were asking her to step into a corporate Shark Tank with nothing but a half-finished arts degree. But then she thought of the diner, the grease, the slow grinding death of her spirit. Failure here meant returning to that. Success meant everything. She took a deep breath. When is the meeting? The next 2 days were a brutal, high-speed education. Zora was buried under an avalanche of files on Colette Beaumont. She learned the matriarch was 78, a widow, and a purist who despised modern trends. She saw this deal not as a financial transaction, but as the potential orphaning of her family's legacy. The day of the meeting arrived. The meeting was held at the Beaumont flagship store, a hallowed space that felt more like a museum. There, sitting in a Louis XVI armchair, was Colette Beaumont, a small, bird-like woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. The meeting began, and it was a disaster. Victoria launched into a slick presentation filled with charts and projections about synergy and shareholder value. After 15 minutes, Madame Beaumont held up a delicate, age-spotted hand. "Enough, Mademoiselle Croft," she said, her voice soft but carrying immense authority. "I have heard these words before. They are empty numbers. You talk of my brand as if it is a chain of coffee shops. You do not understand the soul of what we do." A chill descended upon the room. The two sides were speaking different languages. Zora remained silent, watching. She noticed the small details, a particular leather-bound book on the table, a painting on the wall behind Madame Beaumont. It was a beautiful, intimate portrait of a woman in 18th-century dress, in the soft, romantic style of Fragonard, the artist mentioned in the dossier. As the meeting was about to end in a complete stalemate, Julian caught her eye and gave her the slightest of nods. "Permission." "Madame Beaumont," Zora said, her voice quiet but clear. The entire room turned to look at her. She stood up and walked toward the painting. "This is a beautiful piece," she said in French, her accent warming the air. "The brushwork is so delicate. It reminds me of Fragonard, but it's more intimate." Colette Beaumont's austere expression softened for the first time. "You have a good eye, mademoiselle. That is a portrait of my great-great-great-grandmother. She is the one who convinced her husband, a simple saddle maker, to create the first handbag for Queen Marie Antoinette. She was the true founder of our house. Her vision." Zora turned from the painting to face Madame Beaumont. "Mr. Croft's company is built on technology, on numbers. But he understands that a legacy like yours is built on vision. The vision of a woman like her," she gestured to the portrait. "He does not want to erase that vision. He wants to give it a new voice. A company without a soul is just a machine. You are the soul of Maison Beaumont. He is not here to buy a machine. He is here to protect a work of art." Silence filled the room. Colette Beaumont stared at Zora, her sharp eyes searching. Then she turned her gaze to Julian Croft. "Your father was a builder, was he not, Monsieur Croft?" she asked. Julian, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "He was a carpenter. He taught me that the foundation is everything." Madame Beaumont nodded slowly, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "Perhaps we can have tea next week. And you," she added, her eyes finding Zora, "will bring Mademoiselle James." The following week, the deal was signed. Maison Beaumont was now part of Axiom Global, but with guarantees protecting its heritage and with Colette Beaumont herself appointed to a lifetime seat on the board. That night, Julian found Zora on the balcony of her room, looking out at the twinkling lights of Paris. "The offer I made is on the table," he said. "Director of Cultural Integration, a very generous salary, housing in Paris, and a blank check for your education. It's yours." This was it. The impossible dream. But something had shifted in her over the past week. She had rebuilt a bridge to her own forgotten self. "Thank you," she said, her heart pounding. "It's an incredible offer. But I have a counter-proposal." Julian raised an eyebrow, amused. "I'm listening." I don't want the job as a gift. I want you to invest in me. Not as an employee you discovered, but as a partner you value. I want to run the Maison Beaumont integration, not as a director, but as the project lead. Give me a budget and a team. And I want a performance-based contract. If I succeed, I get a stake in the subsidiary. A small one, but a real one. And I'll pay for my own degree with the salary you give me. She was asking for responsibility, not a reward. She was asking for a chance to build something herself. Julian Croft stared at her, his analytical gaze replaced by one of genuine surprise, which slowly morphed into a broad, brilliant smile. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile, and it transformed his face. A waitress who served me coffee a week ago is now negotiating equity with me on a multi-billion-dollar deal, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. He let out a soft laugh. I knew my instincts were right about you, Zora James. I just had no idea how right. He extended his hand. You have a deal. Welcome to Axiom Global. Zora shook his hand, a current of electricity passing between them. It was a contract. It was the closing of one chapter of her life and the explosive beginning of another. She was no longer a waitress who spoke French. She was a woman who had found her voice in more ways than one. And she was finally, truly, home.